society definitely is at fault for kind of shaping our perspective on what traditional beauty or what beauty is expected to look like, what sexual relationships are meant to look like. For anyone who is kind of discovering themselves and kind of on their sexual journey, do you have any recommendations or tips for them as to how to get started?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important that you really look into if you are watching porn, if you are consuming porn, first of all, pay for your porn because they're sex workers and we want to honor the fact that this is work. And I know society hasn't set that up, but like people are working. But we want to look at if we are watching porn, are you only watching porn of a particular type of body? Like what would it feel like if you switched up the type of porn and even looked at bodies that looked more like yours or bodies that looked less conventionally attractive? So look at, the kind of get out of the categories that Pornhub served you up. And then the other thing that folks can do if they're just starting out and really wanting to get into what might turn them on, what their desires are, is also it broadening your source of erotic input. And so if you are someone that watches porn, maybe try reading erotica because erotica really gives a different stimulation to your imagination and it allows you to create the images versus just being served an aesthetic that is largely harmful. And self pleasure. Like I think self pleasure, whether it's through masturbation, whether it's through even more sensual pleasure, like discovering parts of your body and what kind of touch feels good. Masturbation is an awesome opportunity to be really selfish and to like see what fantasies feel good for you, what parts of your body, what speed. You don't necessarily have to even get to orgasm. It doesn't have to be a goal. We're just trying to figure out what do I need to know about my body and my pleasure so that when I'm with other people, I can also say, oh yeah, like a little bit faster or a little bit slower. We need the language of our own body in order to communicate when we're with other bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that having that communication, that language. You mentioned earlier that when professionals are filming porn, what we don't really see on screen is them setting up their boundaries, their safe words, going over going over the consent practices. For someone who does enter a relationship and it comes time to talk about sex, how should they have that conversation with their partner?
Yeah. This is also what we didn't learn in school, right?
Definitely not. It was just, here is a male reproductive system, here's a female reproductive system, abstinence, condoms, spermicide, that's it. Birth control, that's it.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. I went to Catholic school, so I just learned how to have like babies. Like I just learned how to get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even see a condom when I was in school. So it's really for a lot of us, it can be tough. And so if you feel intimidated around consent and you feel confused around how, or you feel shy about talking up or speaking up about what you like and what you don't like, that's totally understandable. And what we want to do is actually create a culture of consent where we're encouraging each other and giving each other permission to talk about things. And you can have the conversations before. So before you get sexy, you can kind of say, hey, like these are the things that really turn me on. These are the things I'm really into. These are the things I'm curious about. And so if you've never had sex before, you have limited experience, that doesn't mean that you don't know what your body likes. You might really like cuddles. You might like affection. You might like the idea of spanking. So even stuff that you haven't experienced, you can still kind of put out there and just say, yeah, I don't have a lot of experience about this, but I'm kind of curious about it. So we might need to take it slow. The other thing is that consent doesn't end in the one conversation that you have before
Mm-hmm.
you have sex. I think a lot of the consent education I see going around makes it sound like a checklist or like you're supposed to, right? Like you're just supposed to kind of
before and that's it. Like nothing. It's treated as if it isn't ongoing.
Yes, exactly. And, those conversations beforehand obviously can include things like what barriers do you feel comfortable using? What do you need to feel emotionally and physically safe in this experience? And ongoing, it's challenging because it requires us to be really present in the moment and really taking in not just that I'm getting the sex from you, but that I want to give you the kind of pleasure that you want. It might be different than what I want, but I want to focus on that I'm giving you that. And a lot of times in porn, it just looks like someone comes in and like they give it to someone, and then that just happens to be what that person wanted. So we get confused about, someone goes quiet or we're not sure what's happening. And we need to normalize just checking in, being like, oh, babe, like, do you need something? Or do you want to take a break? Or even saying that ourselves, like, something's going on for me. Can we just slow things down? Or can we just like take a break and cuddle? And so being able to speak up about our yes and our no is part of that ongoing consent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's definitely something that we aren't really educated about. It's not conversations that schools are comfortable with teaching us. It's not conversations that you can necessarily bring up with your mom and dad, because depending on what kind of household you live in, that might not be a safe conversation to have. And then if you turn to your friends, who knows, they might also be in a similar situation as you, where they're like, I don't know about these things. And they also probably have similar knowledge that stems from them watching porn, and that's already inaccurate. But if schools were to approach the conversation about sex ed, I know that we've mentioned that they don't really talk about consent, but are there any other topics that you feel like they should cover in their sex ed curriculum?
Yeah, I think our sex ed is so limited to disease reduction. So if this part touches this part, then this is going to happen. And so it doesn't really talk about, well, how do you discover your desires? So I think they should be teaching masturbation. I think that it shouldn't just be kind of like, well, if you don't have a partner, you can touch yourself. It should be masturbation is a way of exploring your body and owning what feels good and what doesn't feel good. I think it would be great if they taught skills around emotional intelligence during sex. So this is what it might look like for someone if they're, what is a maybe isn't a yes, right? Like a maybe is a no. So if it's kind of really like focusing on helping us develop those skills to be more intuitive and mindful when we're having sex. And those are basic communication skills that I think we need to be taught as like socialized people. And like, I also think a lot of our sex ed is very, even if we mention LGBT people or queer people and trans people, it's still very cisgendered and very heteronormative, assumptive.
Yes.
So like ultimately we're not actually talking about queer experiences unless we talk about like identity, but like queer people have sex differently than, heterosexual people. And also all of us could benefit from having a sex ed that didn't focus just on penetration. Not everyone likes to be penetrated, no matter what holes you have or what things you have. So, it's like really expanding the idea of sex beyond orgasm, but like as a way, in the same way we exercise our body and have physical activity, sex is a way of engaging our erotic selves. Whether you have sex or you don't, it's still that those feelings are part of our erotic package.